The Sioux Nation was a large group of Native American people who inhabited the western United States. The Sioux were classified into three major subdivisions: the Lakota, the Dakota, and the Nakota. In the Siouan language, the name Dakota directly translates to allies. There were numerous tribes that made up each of the three groups.
The Sioux people lived peacefully and freely on their land until Americans began to force the natives away from their homes and off their land. White American settlers had done this due to the large amount of gold that could be found there. However, the Sioux refused to allow them to settle there as they wanted to protect their own land and preserve their culture.
Sioux people were so defendant of their land and ways of life that they began to fight back against the Americans. This rivalry led to a number of wars that lasted from 1851 to 1890. This series of wars is known today as the Sioux Wars.
The first war lasted between 1854 and 1856 and broke out directly after the Grattan Massacre. This war is known as the First Sioux War.
The Dakota War of 1862 broke out when the U.S. federal government did not deliver the annuity payments that they had promised to give the Sioux people in the Treaty of Traverse des Sioux.
The Colorado War, which began in 1863, was fought between the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes against white settlers and U.S. militia. They fought over the dispute of whether or not the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes should be allowed to maintain control over the bison migration grounds in the Great Plains.
Red Cloud's War, also referred to as the Powder River War, lasted from 1866 to 1868. It was fought over the control of the Powder River country after General Grenville M. Dodge ordered a punitive expedition against Sioux tribes in the Black Hills region.
Next came the Great Sioux War, which involved a number of significant battles and negotiations that took place between 1876 and 1877. This war began when American settlers took over the Sioux territory in the Black Hills region. They fled here due to the large amounts of gold discovered within the region, although they had no authorization to come here. Eventually, the Great Sioux War ended years later when most of the Indians were killed or put onto reservations.
The Ghost Dance War was the final conflict of all the Sioux Wars that involved the Native Americans and the U.S. government. It took place between 1890 and 1891 and broke out due to the anger that was created over numerous treaty violations by the United States. The war finally ended once Kicking Bear, a Sioux leader, had surrendered.
Thousands of Sioux people, as well as many American generals and white settlers, made up a huge part of the Sioux Wars. George Crook was an American general who forced the Sioux to move onto a reservation. Sitting Bull, a tribal chief, and Crazy Horse, a war leader, both ignored General Crook's demand, and they refused to move off the land and resisted the U.S. government in many other ways as well.
Another Sioux war leader was Red Cloud, who was a chief of the Lakota Division of Sioux people from 1866 to 1909. He led a successful campaign in the Red Cloud's War and was acclaimed as a warrior and a highly respected leader.
George A. Custer was an American general who led a force against the Indians. During the Great Sioux War, every single one of Custer's soldiers died battling against the Indians. This defeat is known as Custer's Last Stand.
The Sioux Wars have had a huge impact on the history of Native American discrimination. Today, we can reflect on these events in history to acknowledge the treatment of these Native American tribes, and to ensure that we are able to move past racial discrimination in America today.